Hello and welcome to this special presentation. Now, how exactly do Prime Ministers decide? What happens? Do they have an inner circle, a close circle of associates, which we have seen and heard of all through history? Do they seek the public's view? And also for those very granular detailing in the Prime Minister's office on taking that hard, cold call, everyday call. How does the Prime Minister work? How have various Prime Ministers in the history of this country worked? How do they decide? Well, to answer this question, in perhaps a one-of-a-kind attempt, many people have written about various Prime Ministers in the history of this country, but this latest book called How Prime Ministers Decide by an extremely familiar television face, Ms. Neerja Chowdhury, I think is going to be very, very significant. Thank you very much for joining us, Ms. Chowdhury. How Prime Ministers Decide. Would you like to tell us first, let's begin with the very first answer, why did you feel the need to help people understand through the course of this book how Prime Ministers decide?
Look, you know, I've now been doing political coverage for almost 40 years. And very early on, I realized that what went out into the public of how decisions were taken was really far from the truth, far from reality. And that the situations used to be very, very different. And I felt that people needed to know what really went on behind the scenes, behind the veil.
Don't people already know? Like, for instance, the functioning, I see in this book you talk about the Indira Gandhi years, Rajiv Gandhi, the Mandal Kamandal phase, Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao, the Vajpayee years, Dr. Manmohan Singh years. Interestingly, the book does not talk about the past 9 years of Narendra Modi. Would you like to tell us why?
You know, I thought about doing Narendra Modi. There was a lot of deliberation on this. I even started to work on it. And then I felt that it would not do justice to the present Prime Minister because he is an incumbent, number one. It is work in progress. He is making a bid for a third term in office. You can be very quickly dated. And I would not have the benefit of hindsight to make an assessment as I have about the other Prime Ministers. The other part of it was that with an incumbent Prime Minister, people around him or her do not talk freely till the person has gone out of power. My information largely has come from a lot of people around the Prime Minister who talked after they had gone out of power. So I felt, you know, a friend of mine said to me, "Ye halka ho jayega." And I felt, yes, probably that was right. And I needed to wait for more time. And I hope at a future date to be able to do that sequel. I haven't also done Nehru.
Yes, you haven't.
Nehru,
but you see, who will you interview to know about him? I mean,
that's another thing.
It's a little late in the day, no?
No, it would be a cut and paste job and that kind of a thing. But you know, I didn't take him, I didn't put him under the microscope or decision by him, not because it's become fashionable to rubbish Nehru. But I felt my own political consciousness had started after Nehru.
Correct.
So while I've taken Prime Ministers who had completed that term,
so in a way, this is your active years in journalism. So you have seen these regimes.
Yes, I've seen. I didn't cover Indira Gandhi actively, but I have seen her. I cut my teeth in journalism by being in a weekly called Himmat, which was brought out from Bombay. It took on the emergency and fought the censorship during the emergency years. So I saw a bit of Indira Gandhi in my Cub reporter days. But certainly Rajiv Gandhi and VP Singh is when I really started to cover on a day-to-day basis.
Let's discuss them one by one.
Yes.
The Indira Gandhi years, the chapters that you have addressed in this book and the interviews that you've done, they tell us a lot about how she functioned as a Prime Minister. Who all did you interview and what conclusion did you arrive at about her style of functioning? Like the whole world knows she was, at least this is the impression, that she was autocratic. She had a very close group of people who were her advisors, and that is how she used to work. And everyone around her, or the chief ministers and others, were mere puppets. At least these are the allegations.
Sanket, you know, I've looked at decisions by prime ministers and how they were made. What were the pulls and pressures? In the case of Indira Gandhi, I looked at, you know, I didn't look at emergency, I didn't look at the creation of Bangladesh. Those are the major things that happened. I chose to look at why she went in for elections in 1977, which is a subject of controversy and a debate even till today. What were the real reasons? And how, you know, she bounced back to power. 77, she was defeated. 80 January, she was back in power with a majority she had not got even after the creation of Bangladesh. One more than that. And who were the people who influenced her? Sanjay Gandhi was her main influencer. Sanjay Gandhi was responsible for her losing power in 1977. Sanjay Gandhi was responsible for her bounce back in 1988, and she gave credit for that. And that is a very interesting story of the use of Sam, Dam, Dhand, Bhed, and she became a mentor for generations of politicians who came after her. How do you get back power? How do you retain power? Statecraft, power at any cost. So, and she was a very, today's Indian Express has, you know, featured one part, the end of that chapter of when she went to Chamunda Devi after Sanjay Gandhi's death. And that is part of the Hinduization of Indira Gandhi, which was one of the reasons why she bounced back to power. But she demolished her opponents. Raj Narayan, who defeated her in 1977, who was responsible for her being disqualified from parliament. He had done the case against her, fought the case against her, and she was disqualified in 1975, which led to the emergency. How he became her one-man demolition squad, how she got him on her side, how she neutralized Jayaprakash Narayan, who had led the Bihar movement against her, how she sidelined Babu Jagjeevan Ram, who could be the only one who could have been a challenge to her and become Prime Minister within the Janata government. So it is a very fascinating story of an understanding of what power is all about.
Wow, very interesting. I don't think people talk much when you discuss Indira Gandhi about her, the period between 77 and 80. Right? Usually, as you rightly said, it's about 71. It's about the imposition of emergency, but not the bouncing back. And of course, her assassination, which is usually in conversation. Interesting. This brings us to the next Prime Minister, the Rajiv Gandhi years. The world knows that he was a reluctant Prime Minister, and it was a position that he was just installed in. And then of course some very interesting episodes happened. But what chapter, what aspect of his Prime Ministership do you actively cover in your book?
See, I look at the decision, the twin decisions he took after the Shah Banu judgment in April 85, which was to give maintenance to an old woman with 5 children who was divorced after 45 years, and she asked for maintenance under the Criminal Procedure Code. And the court gave it to her, and that unleashed a complete maelstrom in the country, and it affected the politics of 30 years after Rajiv Gandhi. Rajiv Gandhi would come as the great hope, you know, 414 Lok Sabha seats he'd won, and he was really looked upon, and he set about, you know, solving problems. Assam Accord, Punjab Accord, Mizoram Accord. He lowered the voting age, he set up technology missions, anti-defection law, a futuristic Prime Minister. And this one judgment. As I say, big doors sometimes swing on little hinges. And his response, because the Muslims reacted, was to go in for a Muslim women bill to undo this judgment. And when the Hindus reacted, it was to facilitate the opening of the locks at the disputed structure, Ram Janmabhoomi Babri Masjid structure. So he had both communities up in arm, and he fell between two stools. So Rajiv Gandhi, as I say, the future-looking Prime Minister of India, but naive about caste, religion, and the hold it had.
So do you feel that this was a decision which he himself would not have taken, but would have been advised to do this by his advisors? That why don't you do this to contain or appease this section of the society?
Yes, his cousin, some books have come out which say that he was kept in the dark. And Arun Nehru took the decision for him. But my book gives a counterpoint of view. Also quoting Arif Muhammad Khan, who is today the governor.
Correct. And was
Kerala,
part of the cabinet then.
Who was, and who was he got him to speak in parliament in favor of Shah Banu judgment. And then he went against it. And, Arif Muhammad Khan, I hope, will speak, at the launch of the book, he's going to come.
Okay.
So that's going to be a very interesting thing. Because he said Arun Nehru had told him that he had got Rajiv Gandhi directly to speak to the Chief Minister of UP and said the locks must be open and please work on it. So, could Rajiv, as the Prime Minister of India, have been kept in the dark?
Is it even possible?
Is it even possible? Some people say that he probably knew, but probably didn't realize the implications of that decision.
And that explains his political naivety.
Politically naive, yes, that on these things, certainly. And as I say, those decisions led to the rise of BJP in the decades that followed.
Because that is the period where the BJP started rising.
That's right.
Very, very interesting.
Because they tasted blood.
Would you call this Rajiv Gandhi's biggest blunder?
Yes, undoubtedly, not being able to understand the impact that it would have. Caste and community was where he fell short of.
Okay, let's talk about two phases and the respective prime ministers. The Mandal Kamandal phase, where the BJP rose, and we also saw a rise of the socialist forces and prime ministers for very short terms, and then Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao coming in, and then of course the Vajpayee and Manmohan era. Let's first talk about that little state of flux, political flux in Indian politics, and the prime ministers during that regime. What were you able to find?
VP Singh, of course, the big decision was the Mandal decision, pulling out this Mandal Commission report to give reservations to the OBCs, which again changed the politics of India for all time to come. And today also, there's no party that's been able to reverse the decision. The courts have endorsed it. And no party wants to. Now the power is devolving from the OBCs to the most backwards, to the Mahadalits, to, and that's a devolution of democracy. And VP Singh, for whatever reasons, to save his beleaguered government, because he faced challenges from within, from his Deputy Prime Minister Devilal, Chandrasekhar, who was outside of the government, Rajiv Gandhi was out to topple him, and so he went in for Mandal. And what I have said in the book and shown, that Mandal, it is normally said that Mandir was a response to Mandal. I have said that Mandal was a response to the temple politics of Mandir.
Oh, the other way around?
The other way around.
Okay, why?
So read my book.
Okay. Interesting. You have generated enough curiosity, because I agree. I mean, usually the political folklore in Delhi and the country is that in a response to Mandal is when the BJP raised the temple rhetoric. You argue otherwise.
And I've quoted people who were in the BJP.
Fantastic. It will be very interesting to read. Let's now talk about Mr. P.V. Narasimha Rao. The big highlight of his government was the economic liberalization. what else do you find about his style of functioning? Here is also a Prime Minister who was very famous, or should I say infamous, for considering no decision also as a decision.
The non-decision is what I've looked at.
Okay.
Allowing the Babri Masjid to come down. And I start the chapter by saying he told a group of journalists that I allowed it to come down because it would for all time. You think I don't understand Rajniti. I was brought up in Rajniti. And I allowed this to happen because it would for all time to come remove something that is giving a fillip to the BJP politics. So,
P.V. Narasimha Rao has been quoted as saying to journalists.
A group of journalists, including Nikhil Chakravarti,
Okay.
Ram Bahadur Rai, who also was there that day, who I've quoted,
Okay.
and and others who said this. So, two other bits again. I will not reveal them.
Yeah. So this was, according to you, an attempt by Mr. Rao, who reportedly told reporters, as you have quoted in this book,
and that he actually,
that
he
this
tried.
will blunt the BJP's political
If
campaign.
the mandir is not in their hands as an issue,
Yeah.
then it will dilute the politics.
Would you, with the benefit of hindsight, think that Mr. Rao was so wrong?
Mr. Rao was wrong in the sense he managed to defuse the issue, but at a huge cost. Because what it did, during his term, Mandir ceased to be an issue. And a year down the line after the demolition, the Congress won in states. If you remember that,
Yes,
in 93, in North Indian states. Now what it did was to damage the psyche of the Muslim community, the minorities, that the Indian constitution and the Indian state failed to protect their rights. And that, damage to the psyche is a process that's gone on. And we must not forget that Muslims are not 20,000.
Yeah.
They are almost, figures can vary, 17-18% of the population
Correct.
today. You cannot dump them in the sea, even if you feel, unko apni auqat mein rehna chahiye, that they have created problem, whatever you're feeling, even if it's justified. We have to live with them and live with dignity and equality. So that is the damage that was done. Now, as far as Narasimha Rao was concerned, initially he tried to resolve it. He set up, groups to talk, to get the two communities to dialogue. He had conversations with the religious leaders. He would sit with the sadhu sons on the floor, recite from the Vedas, and they would be charmed. So also with the clerics from the Muslim community. He reached out to them through politicians. Again, the story is here. But when he failed and the VHP announced the Kar Seva on 6th December, then he realized the game was probably up. Still he was buying time. And when it happened, then as he says, he allowed it to happen. I find him very fascinating. An erudite, learned man who really understood India and how it was, the ground reality of India. But he didn't allow his right hand to know what the left hand was doing and vice versa. There was,
won't you say that this was very Congress at that time?
No, all of them have a coterie. But I think Narasimha Rao was probably the only Prime Minister, BP Singh also not to such an extent, he had a couple of people around, but who did not rely on a coterie. He used people for whatever he wanted done, but one did not know what the other was doing.
What the P.V. Narasimha Rao regime could not do, the Vajpayee regime did. It eventually happened. What are your key findings from that period, from that era?
See, that's what I've looked at. I've looked at with Vajpayee, his decision to go nuclear, and with Manmohan Singh, the Indo-Us nuclear deal.
So that forms the core of...
That is the decision I've looked at. There are only decisions I've looked at, how they were made. In that, of course, about the Prime Minister, his style of functioning, his politics, all that has to come in.
Yeah.
Vajpayee is very fascinating because he was a flip-flop Prime Minister. Now, he was in the 50s a complete peacenik. He wrote this very beautiful poem, Hiroshima Ki Pida, about how the devastation in Hiroshima when the atom bomb was dropped there. In the 60s, China tested their nuclear weapon, and 64, and the Jansang at that time was completely committed to a very hawkish position on going nuclear, and India being a strong military power. And so he, in Parliament, spoke very forthrightly, strongly, that India should go nuclear, become a nuclear weapons state. 70s, in 79, 77 he became the foreign minister. 79 Morarji had to take a decision because K. Subramaniam, the father of the present external affairs minister, had given a report that as joint intelligence chief that Pakistan was a screwdriver away from a weapon, and India needed to take a stand. And look at the way decisions were taken. Morarji, totally against the nuclear, India going nuclear, calls a meeting of the Cabinet Committee of Political Affairs to take a decision, democratically take a decision. And that also is in the thing. I'm not going to tell you what. That's a very fascinating story. But Vajpayee voted against.
Going nuclear.
Going nuclear when his earlier party, his party was for it, and he was for it, and he sided with Morarji. And this is in 79. In 98, he is the man who actually brought India to the high table.
What a fascinating story.
So it's a very fascinating story.
From being anti-nuke in the light of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, to being for it, then being against it, and then eventually being the face.
Being the face
of the test.
And Narasimha Rao was a very important factor who influenced. They had that also is in the book, the fascinating relationship between Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee, and this is the beautiful part of our democracy. The political relationships across the aisle. You can pick up the phone, talk to each other, and so on.
Exactly. Now, last, Dr. Manmohan Singh, your book talks about the Indo-US nuclear deal. What did you learn about it? See, because it led to a bit of political emergency for UPA 1. I mean, they would have lost power had it not been for the Samajwadi Party helping them win the trust vote. But the style of functioning and exerting himself to go ahead with it at any cost, even at the cost of the government, what were your findings?
You know, this very quiet, silent Dr. Saad, apolitical. He'd come through the bureaucratic stream in all the major bureaucratic positions that he held. And it was Sonia Gandhi, who was half prime minister, really speaking. So the politics of it was to be left to Sonia Gandhi, the administration and governance was to be left to Dr. Manmohan Singh, though these divisions can never be made, but you know, that was the decision. But Dr. Manmohan Singh, how he managed to get his way. Sam, Dam, Dand, Ved again. How he managed to get the Samajwadi Party, how he got Amar Singh
But was it him or was it the political maneuvering of the Congress?
No, it was him and people around him. Again, I won't reveal who played a role, but anyway, I won't reveal.
I just
but you know, he had his way, and the left withdrew support.
Yeah.
And the government survived because the Samajwadi Party, which had opposed the Indo-US deal, came on board, and thanks to APJ Abdul Kalam also.
Yeah.
And one of the other reasons, of course, every country has their own self-interest. America looked at India as a counter to China from then onwards.
Which is why they wanted to invest in
But there was
technology.
a chemistry between George Bush, the President of the United States,
and Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Dr. Manmohan Singh, and experts say without that possibly
this would not have happened.
It might not have happened.
So as far as the Dr. Manmohan Singh period is concerned, in your book you reveal the name of the person who was instrumental in making this politically possible.
Yes. Politically,
and that
he played a very pivotal role in getting Amar Singh on board and the Samajwadi Party on board, and that was so Manmohan Singh
in the Congress.
No, outside of the
Congress. Because
you now read the book.
Yeah, of course. No, had it been the Congress, then the name is pretty obvious. You know, someone very close to Sonia Gandhi, perhaps...
They came on board. Sonia Gandhi then of course went with Dr Manmohan Singh finally, and once left withdrew support, that operation the Congress party mounted.
Wow, lots of unanswered questions that you're leaving the viewers with in this interview, but it'll be a fascinating read, wouldn't it? Thank you very much, Ms. Neerja Chowdhury, and congratulations on this book.
Thank you very much.